You're listening to She's the Business podcast.
Most people do not realize just how much content they've already got right under their noses, literally at your fingertips in your business, that you can use as content to share online, which is so great. So if you've ever felt like you're really overwhelmed by the task of creating content in your business, and it's often in that too hard basket, then today's episode is created just for you. We're going to make your life easier, much more simple, and even, yes, fun. So stay tuned. It's coming right up.
Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Osborne, and in my 23 years of business and marketing, I've built many brands to become multi-billion-dollar companies. And just in the last 10 years, I've built 2 online businesses of my own from my dining room table with 2 little babies running around at my feet. I've made it my mission to inspire you to get out of your own way and become the successful business owner who's living the lifestyle you really desire without all the hustle. This is She's the Business podcast, made by women for women. This is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration.
I'm joined today by the lovely Emily Aborn, who is a content copywriter, podcast host, and speaker. She's been an entrepreneur since 2014, and she has experience in running bricks and mortar type of businesses as well as online. She's worked in over 96 different industries, and she's absolutely has a passion for helping those people with a big mission to increase their visibility, connect with clients, and bring their dreams and visions to life through their content. So you're going to love what Emily has to share with you. She lives and breathes content, but she has some really practical, simple ways to share with us about how we can actually use and repurpose content we already have, content we've already created that you may not even realize that you've got. So you're going to love this chat that I have with Emily. You might want to have a pen and paper just to jot down a few notes because there's so much gold in this episode. And thanks for listening. Without further ado, let me play the interview for you. Okay, and welcome. I've got here with me Emily Aborn. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Emily.
I'm so excited to be here, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Yes, likewise. I can't wait to get into this conversation. I think Emily and I both have an absolute love for making business more simple and saving time. And there's so much time that can be saved in our content. But before we get into this, Emily, you're a copywriter and a content producer and coach. Can you tell us a bit more about your business, who you serve, and what you do?
Sure. I would love to. And thank you for the opportunity. Yes. So like you said, I'm a content copywriter, and I use those 2 words together because content and copy are a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Content is really that sort of stuff that it's not necessarily geared towards getting a conversion or to a sale. It's kind of like that body of work that we're building within our businesses, right? Like the blogs that we do and the emails that we do and the social media posts that we do and the podcasts that we do. And then the copy is that piece that is conversion in nature. So it's the piece getting people to take that next step with us. So that might look like a website copy. It might look like a sales page. It might look like some of those more like call to action-y things. So I kind of combine the 2 because I believe in a little bit of heart and a little bit of brain, a little bit of rock and roll and a little bit of country. And I put that together for my clients into like an overall strategy for what they're really creating with their words. And of course, like you, I'm a podcaster. I have 2 little podcast babies that I just absolutely love. She built this podcast. And then this year I launched my Content with Character podcast, which is very specific to like visibility, basically. So I specifically would say I work with women entrepreneurs, but I've discovered this niche. Like sometimes our niches or niches, whatever people call it, sometimes they just find us accidentally. And I've really found a great alignment and groove in working with people in home trades. So meaning builders, meaning interior designers, even painting companies, like all of those kinds of people.
Yeah.
Really, we do well together because we do the same thing. We step into an empty space and we see the vision and then we create it. And so it's kind of like samesies different. You know, they have trouble with their words. I can't hang a curtain to save my life. So,
but you can help them to explain how to do that or why they need someone who's amazing at it. I love that. I love how you, really showed the difference in the copy and the copywriter and the content, because I think that sometimes it just all gets bunked into the same bucket, and you get people who are copywriters that are conversion copywriters, specifically writing things like sales pages and emails and like the really hard conversion level. Not that it's, don't know whether that hard is the right word, but it's right at the point of sale kind of piece.
Yeah.
And then what we're talking about here is really the body of your content, that it's sort of more serving to attract people in, let them get to know you, build a bit of credibility, build some authority. And yes, there is always an action we want them to take, but it might be a little bit softer in terms of, hey, read the next article or subscribe to the email list or, whatever that next piece might be, as opposed to it's not at the point of sale. Have I correctly understood that in terms of what
perfectly?
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say, like, if somebody comes looking specifically for a sales page, I usually am like, you don't probably want me doing that, because it will be a very gentle sales page.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. And so, wow, today our topic we were going to dive into, because there's so much around content and, content creation and all of that is, I'm sure we could talk about for hours and hours. But we decided that today we would chat about repurposing, because would you say this is, I guess, a bit of hidden magic that so many people probably aren't doing to the level that they could be? And maybe we're going to help to bring up some ideas and inspiration about where you've got some content right underneath your nose, right under your fingertips, that can take you almost no time to put together and put out there, that can really help your business.
It can save you so much time and energy, and also create this like level of cohesion within your content that people may not consciously be aware of, but on a subconscious level, it all connects and makes sense. And it really does elevate you when you use repurposing, I think. So yes, it's like, I don't know if anyone else's mom ever did that. We did not have a lot of money when I was growing up. And when my mom would work out to like Jane Fonda, okay, like in the 80s, and
yes, mine too.
we didn't have hand weights. Okay. So my mom, she's very resourceful. She went and got these big old, like Campbell's. I mean, maybe they were generic brand, but Campbell's soup cans. And she would use those as her hand weights. I like to think of repurposing like that. It's like, what do I already have in the pantry that can take place of the hand weights, so I'm not having to use more time, resources, expenses, et cetera, to purchase something new to do this workout and look like Jane Fonda.
Yes. Oh, love that. So what sort of content are we looking at in terms of when you're thinking, right, well, what have we got here? What can we repurpose? Where are you starting with that? What are you looking at?
I love that question, because there's words that we use in the entrepreneurial space, even marketing. I use it all the time, but marketing, content, copy, like all these things, and they start to lose their meaning a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I think it's helpful to kind of define what content actually is. It's really the words that we're putting out into the world. So that could look like your blog. It could look like social media. It could look like your podcast. It could look like the emails you send. But it also is in other little places. It's in your website copy, or on your website page as a whole.
Yeah.
It's when you guest on somebody else's podcast. Like, that is actually you producing content. It's when you speak on stages. It's when you maybe write a book or contribute a chapter to a book. So that is all different examples of content, and all of the places we can sort of like mine through as we're looking to find out what we want to repurpose, and also how.
Yes. Oh, amazing. And so when we start looking at it, we're probably thinking, Oh my goodness, I've actually got so much content. I'm definitely putting my hand up here and saying sometimes it feels like that way to me. I'm like, I have got so much content. It's almost overwhelming. Like when I'm like thinking, well, where do I even start to figure out what should I be repurposing? How do I repurpose it? What are you advising people to do? Like, how do you get started with repurposing, or what should be that first step?
Okay, let's say you've been in business. How long have you been in business, Jessica?
Well, I started my first business in 2010, so that's like 13 years. But this one, let's say it's about 6 years old at the moment. So yeah, I've got 6 years worth of content.
Great, same. So, and like you, I had a business prior to this. Now, technically speaking, I bet you and I, with our savvy little brains, we could go back to our old businesses and somehow turn it into something relevant to today. Let's put that aside. Let's focus on the past 6 years.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would kind of think to yourself, all right, let's say in 2024, you're like, I'm not going to create anything new. I'm going to entirely repurpose what I already have. Mm-hmm. So I would sort of sit down and for myself, I would say, all right, let's start with month number 1. Let's start with January. What do I want to create as like sort of a theme or an umbrella in January? Now, maybe this is like what you want to guide people to. So maybe it's like, I'm kicking off this group program in January. I want everything to center around that group program. I want all signs leading to the group program. Yeah. Maybe it's something a little more like, oh, I just would like a nice theme, like self-care in my business for January. Mm-hmm. So you kind of go through and find everything related to that. I'm going to use a really tangible example. So this year I took a SEO course and it was 9 months long, and we did different projects every single month. Like she had us creating, I think I wrote like 40 blogs this year. It was crazy. So when I tell you that next year I do not need to create anything new, I mean it. Like next year, I'm just coming back to this year and redoing it all. So one of the months, the goal was take one topic, a micro topic, and repurpose it as many ways as you could. I chose the topic of repurposing. So it was very meta. So I repurposed a blog or that topic into, I think it was 6 blogs, 2 podcast episodes, all my social media, all my emails. Like I basically took that and created an entire month focused on repurposing.
Wow.
So that's something you could do, is kind of lump things into like categories, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's say you're starting with kind of, okay, I'm not going to redo anything. I'm just going to go from here on out. So if that was your kind of strategy, I would say anything long form that you're creating, be it a blog or an email or a podcast or speaking on somebody else's stages, let's look at how we can like break those things down. And we can talk really distinctly about like how to break things down. I do want to say one thing about repurposing, which I think gets a little misunderstood. Mm-hmm. I think people think that repurposing is just like, oh, it's copy and paste. Like I just copy from here. Here's one I bet you hear too. I just take the AI transcript from my podcast and I just copy it over into a blog.
Yeah.
That is a great strategy if you are going to majorly clean that blog up. But repurposing is not often as simple as copy and paste. Mm-hmm. When you literally take something and you copy and paste it, that's called cross posting. So that's like I am posting from LinkedIn to Facebook. I am posting from Facebook to Instagram. That's cross posting. Yeah. I'm not talking about copy and paste. Sometimes when we reshare something in a different way, we have to put it into a little bit of context for people. Mm-hmm. So if I take a blog and I want to turn it into a podcast, I can't just sit there and read the blog. I mean, I could, but my listeners, they're good. They would know I was doing that. So I have to Emilyize that. I have to add a little bit of storytelling into it. I have to kind of change the context of things. And then same vice versa. If I'm spinning it from podcast to blog, I'm going to shorten it. It's not going to be 20,000 words because nobody would read that. So that's important to remember, is that it is simple. It is not as simple usually as copy and pasting. I'm going to pause and let you kind of go where you want to go with that. And we can dive into like the parts and pieces if you want of how to specifically tease things out.
Yeah, awesome. Because I think I love how you're saying it's not just a copy and paste, which, it seems like that would be easy. And I think there's a few different places I want to go with this. I think back, before COVID, BC, as my parents have like started calling it, back before then, a lot of the advice out there was, take a blog, then you put that into an email, then you chop it up and there's a few social snippets, and like that is essentially kind of where you can begin. But I think that what you're talking about here is where I see that we've really shifted to over the last few years, where yes, we've got that piece of content, but when we're taking it into social, we're not just sort of taking a line out of it or a snippet out of it. We're actually going, hey, this is a bit of gold, but now I'm going to kind of wrap something around it that actually feels like it's been made for that platform. What we're doing though is we're removing that need to kind of really think about it, aren't we? Because you already know the topic, you know what it is, it's there in front of you. So it's so much easier then to take that little piece that you're like, yes, this was a great point that I made in the blog. You're like, I can take that great point. Now I can turn it into, a social post, or I might even go live on Instagram, because remember, social media is not just written, right? You could kind of then say it. And I love that you're saying don't just read it out, because we can tell, I think when something is scripted, you can absolutely tell when somebody's reading from a script as opposed to a natural speech. And we do engage with it so much better because we're all getting so used to listening. Podcasts are huge. People listen to podcasts all the time. We also watch videos. You can really tell when somebody's sort of speaking naturally versus, reading off a script. So I think that was a really great point. There was a question, I guess. Oh, did you want to dive in?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I read my emails every week to my readers or listeners. And even in that reading, I find, as I'm reading it, I change things a lot, or I'll put it in like I like to put a little surprise in there for the people that listen. So I agree. I think we're getting savvier as consumers and readers and listeners. And we can tell when things are written by AI, like your Otter AI. And we can also tell when you're reading a script. So yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like on that, because it is one of the things I often am talking to my clients about. They're like, it feels so hard to create content. They want to increase their search engine optimization, and they might be thinking, I've got to write blogs, and I'll be like, well, that's not the only way of creating content. Do you prefer to speak instead? Or what are the things? You might have a preference of one way over another, but it is, if you do have something that's written, you can take it and that can be your notes. Like, you don't literally need to do a lot. You can sit there as a savvy human with what you've written and kind of use that as your speaking notes without reading it verbatim word by word. And that would be what I'd suggest is like, hey, how easy is that? Literally pick up that piece that you wrote, turn on your camera and just talk to it, have it in your head and just let it riff. Because when you speak from your heart, then you've actually got so much more energy and power behind your words, because you're kind of really saying them with meaning as opposed to reading them, which can kind of, unless you get really well practiced at it, like someone like Stephen Fry, he can read, Harry Potter and put all the meaning into it. But for most of us, when we read, we sort of lose a lot of that energy, which can make it hard, I think, for people to listen to. So, that's just something we can always make life easier. And that's what we're talking about today is like, how can we make your life easier? You don't actually need to be finding new content everywhere. You've got the content already. Pull it out and think, well, how could I repurpose that? What else could I turn it into?
I think you touched on something important. I think that one question to ask ourselves when we're looking to create new content, like you said, a lot of your clients are like, I need to create content. I need to create content. So I want them to ask themselves, I want all of us, I need to do this too. Like, why? Why am I doing this? And the other thing to remember is like which there probably is an answer in there. So just keep digging till you find it. But when you get that answer, like write or create from that place, because people on the other side, like it's very subtle, but we can typically, I mean, again, like we're just becoming like a little bit more sensitive, I think, as humans, because we are getting so much content. There's an energy that goes into content. Like you and I clearly can tell right now that each other is excited to have this conversation. But it is actually the same with written stuff. Like there is an energy even to what you write, and it comes through. So starting, I think, with that place of why, and not that feeling of like, oh, I have to do this. I have to create more. I have to create content. It will just help you to create from a better space, like both headwise and energetically. And then it helps it come across a little bit more like, ooh, this is exciting to read. Like come from a place of excitement and curiosity and like, what do I have to share with the world, rather than like, oh, I have to create content.
Yeah, because as soon as it's that task that you have to do, it just will drag on and on and on. And I think it kind of turns off that creative juice in your brain as well. Now, I have got a tricky question for you, and I'm really interested to hear your answer, because when it comes to content and repurposing, especially, what I've discovered is systems are so important. They have made my life so much easier. Like I've got quite a lot of systems in my business that help me to repurpose content super, super easily. For example, things like if I post something on social media, my VA saves it into an Asana board. And so I've got this giant library of content that, I've created on the fly, and now it's there in an Asana board, and it can be reused at any time. So when we're planning out social media, if I don't have anything kind of new that I'm like, hey, I've got this poster I'm doing, she's got a giant library to dive into, because I'll go, oh, let's post something on this topic. What have we already got? That just saves so much time. So there's this system there. But I think that for people like me, I'm not sure if everybody's like this, I am not someone who can sit down and say, right, on the first Monday of every month, I'm going to batch my content, and I'm going to sit down and figure out what I'm going to plan out for the month or even a year. I hear some people plan it out for a year. I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know what I want to say in a couple of weeks' time. Like I can do this week, maybe next week. But my content is so much driven by where I am feeling right now, what I see, things that are going on. Like I kind of respond to what I can see happening out there, what conversations that I've had, things that I've noticed, what I'm noticing myself right now. And it's kind of this, what you're saying, like that's where my energy is, because it's really present in my mind and my heart at the time. I'm often quite passionate about it. So I've got something to say and I'm going to say it. But how do we temper that with actually having systems and processes? Because I know for some people, having a system in place really helps to remove the stress out of it. So they're like, right, I'm going to write this, and then, here's my system of what I turn it into or how I work with it. How do you, am I making sense? How do we kind of balance the intuition side of the content creation, so we've got something that we really care about, with having a system that helps us to kind of remove all the thinking, so you don't have to think so much what you're going to do with it. You kind of know what happens next, and it flows.
So I love your system. It makes it so that your content is super, super relevant, right? Relevant to you, and also relevant to like maybe what's going on with the people that you're in the community with. Yeah. So I think I am maybe one step more towards a system, but I'm not full-fledged system. So system to me is like a spectrum, right? Like there's like the very systemized person, then there's like everything in between. So what I do is I map out like a month sort of theme. I give myself a theme, and I'll use October as my theme example because it's a really fun one. Okay. So my October theme right now is risky business. So basically I'm calling attention to every single thing that I can think of that is like shisty in business, that makes business ownership scary. Okay. Failure is terrifying as a business owner. So my first episode was about failure. So then I don't get into the granular just yet. Like I might just put that. So basically I'll list out like all the emails I'm sending. I don't put titles to them. I'm just literally putting dates there. Like I know what the dates are that I send emails. I know the dates that I produce podcast episodes. I know what guest episodes I'm doing. So I put those at the top. And then I know like what speaking engagements I'm doing. So that's just sort of like, okay, this is what I have happening this month in my business. Like this is what I'm generating content for. And then I kind of put just like a loose idea into each spot. So failing was one idea. Copycatting is an idea. When people ghost us, that's an idea. I'll kind of fill in some of those spots. As I go along, I do my podcast about 2 weeks in advance. So as I go along, I'll kind of be like, oh, wait, something else just came up and I might replace it, right? Yeah. But it's not until I actually sit down and create it. I wouldn't say I'm a batcher, but I can like sit down, do an episode, turn it into a blog, and then turn it into all my social, like in one sitting, just because I get hyper focused.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that for anybody. But what you could do is simply like, let's say you sit down, you do the episode, right? Or you do the blog, and then you just make a little list for yourself. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And all you do is say, call to action leading people to the podcast, call to action leading people to the blog, tip from the blog, quote from the blog. You know, like you're just literally pulling out like, I think I'm going to do a quote or a story or something from that piece of content. You don't even have to get granular there. But then when you go sit down on that day, then you're like, ooh, I was going to do a story from that podcast episode today and share it onto my Instagram and onto my Facebook. And so you pull up a story from the episode. So that's one way to do it. I think the other thing people could do is reverse engineer. So let's say you start with social, right? Like let's say social is what you start with. You could then take all of the social that you have, find those, actually have your VA do this, but find the common threads. Like, okay, I give a lot of tips in this area. Well, could I turn it into a 10 tips blog or a 10 tips podcast, you know, and like have them all in one place for people. Those kind of tips podcasts, especially, those are the ones that get your listeners like getting their pens out and being like, I have to get all the tips. And then you can just like turn around and share those again on social media, tip by tip by tip by tip, you know? So I want to say this too, because I think that this is forgotten. And this is why next year I'm challenging myself, like not to create anything new. I think that we think that every single person like knows what we already shared. They're like, oh yeah, I already shared that. I can't share that again. I just did that. Like, I hate to break it to us all, but if somebody is paying attention to every single thing you post and email and share, like that is your number one person, and do not let them go.
Oh my goodness.
Most people just aren't, you know, they're flying fast and they might see half of something. So you can say it again. You can say it in a different way. You can say it shorter. You can say it longer. Like you can take anything you've already created and just literally chop out 3 of the sentences and repeat the exact same thing.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I had that written down and I was like, wow, we've really had a moment of connecting our brains there, because I was like, saying what you have said before, this is, I think, one of the things that stress people out is like, oh, what else can I talk about? It's like, actually, you're doing yourself a really disfavor if you keep on creating new topics and new themes, because people are going to be really confused about what it is that you're really there and about. Like, stick to your script. Like, you don't actually need to have a lot of different stuff to talk about. You just keep on saying it in a different way. You like repurpose that same idea, that theme, and your content, because like you said, you know, you posted it somewhere. Well, how many of your audience actually saw it? Like, probably not many. And even if they did, they're not going to remember. They've got their heads in their own business or their own life. There's so much going on. So yes, as soon as you start, I think that's the hardest probably bit, to be honest, is beginning in the first place, because you don't have anything that you've already created. So start off like really simply. And as soon as you've started creating, you've now got, you've creating a content bank as you're creating it. So you're building that foundation, and anything you're creating, then you can go on to, you know, to repurpose. And like you're saying, there's so many different ways of doing it. I think it's kind of figuring out what is a way that works well for you and works well for your lifestyle. I love how you shared different sort of ways that you could systemize it, because I'm a bit like you, where I could sit down, do a podcast episode. I'll write the show notes. I'll, you know, write a snippet for social and stuff all in one go, because it's fresh in my brain. So to me, that's the easiest time to do it, rather than leave it, come back. Oh yeah, what did we talk about? And I have to kind of refresh my brain again. So I do that, but I also tend to create when I'm feeling in flow. So
Same.
this might really stress out some people out there that are like, I need to know exactly when I'm doing everything in my week. Well, for me, that doesn't really work, because if I've blocked out time and it's not when it's working, I'll just sit there and faff around. It'll actually waste my time. So I create when I'm in flow. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got this great idea for a podcast. I might sit down and record it straight away if I have time to, because while it's fresh. That's my ideal. If not, I'll make some notes. I'll try to do it within the next few days, because by next week, sometimes that idea is kind of like lost a lot of its power, or I'm not quite as keen on it anymore, because I'm onto something else and I'm thinking about some new topic. So, I think when sharing and just thinking about what it is that works for you, like how do you actually operate as a human? So what might be a really good system to support you in how you usually operate, how your brain works, and what makes it feel easier for you? Because for me, trying to stick me into a really rigid structure, it's like every Monday you're going to do this, I will actually subconsciously rebel against that. I will find reasons not to do that, and I definitely can't do it this Monday because of whatever reason, because that's just my personality. I prefer to feel like I'm in total control all the time, but also in flow. I can see you nodding away there, Emily.
Yeah, it's funny. I rebel. I don't rebel against myself. I actually am I uphold my own promises, but if somebody else wants to do a co-working session, they're like, let's create content on Fridays at 1. I'm like, nah, I can't. I can't meet you. I'll be busy. So, and I've tried doing the accountability thing with other people. That's where I am I'm so sorry, but I just need to create it on my own time.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I wrote down a little word that you mentioned just before. You were talking about risky business, but you mentioned copycats. And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting, because copycatting is also kind of relevant when we're talking about content. Just interested to hear your thoughts, as a content creator. What are you advising people to do when they're, obviously we've talked about how you look at your own stuff. Where should, when they're looking for inspiration or ideas and thinking, okay, well, what's a new way of sharing this, or what have you, what do you advise people to do or not do? On the theme of copycatting, I'll just open that up and let you go wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah, this is a hard one. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't fully finished my thoughts. I'm scared to do the podcast episode that I want to do. I can tell you a really great way to make it so you're harder to copy. And that is being the only you that there is, meaning you are completely 100% you, and you use the silly phrases that you use, and you let those eyebrows raise, and you burp sometimes on your podcast, being 100% your goofy self, or whatever you are, buttoned up, polished, however you are, because that is the only thing that somebody cannot copy from you. I think it takes a lot of guts to copy somebody. And one thing I love doing, so sometimes you're not sure where an idea came from. You genuinely do not know. You're like, I think I saw this somewhere, but it might be my own idea. I don't know. Yeah. The entrepreneurial soup is all so mixy.
Yes.
So I will often say, this is not my original thought. I can't remember where I saw it. I say that all the time. My podcast, I didn't know this because I'm a millennial, and we in school, plagiarism was a serious thing. I thought I was going to go to jail the first time I plagiarized something. And in college, same thing. But then as I got into the online space, I just sort of forgot, all that stuff went out the window. And now people are just copying and pasting each other and quoting each other and misquoting each other. And it's kind of nuts. So I did lose track of it. And I don't know if I overtly copied somebody. I'm just saying I know that I got in the swirl. My friend, Karen Kenny, is the one that really brought my attention back and was you need to cite sources. This is school, right? So if you hear something on a podcast and it gives you the idea, say the host's name. It gives you way more credibility when you say this isn't my original thought. I got it from so-and-so, and it gave me these other ideas, or it gave me these other insights. Like, also as a podcaster, when I don't know if you feel this way, but if someone says your name on their podcast, you're like, oh my God, it just makes your day. Like, it is the best feeling. And it's not about getting the credit. It's about having the professional confidence, I think, to be able to give that credit to somebody else, And I think that we think it's going to make us look less of an expert if we're like, oh, I read that in a book, or I heard that on a podcast. But actually it shows like you're out there learning, like you're learning from all these different sources, and you're like an intelligent human being. So I say, please, 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 please quote your sources, give people credit. Don't copycat people's stuff. Like the creative, like you're saying, the creative process it's not like it just falls from the sky, like we're actually using our brains and like our own unique gifts to create stuff. Yeah. So then for somebody to turn around and just make that their own, it is kind of a slap in the face. The reason I'm like, I think I have to do a podcast is because I've seen it happen to me recently, and it makes me so uncomfortable. So when it comes to like handling it, I don't know. I mean, I'll probably make some sarcastic joke about it, but I would never call the person out because that's just not my personality. But I've seen people do it. I've seen like those big influencers send an email to their entire list, circling the copycat stuff, like putting the two next to each other. And so you just have to be careful. I mean, it's not definitely something you want to be messing with. Yeah. No,
it's so interesting, isn't it? Because when we are reading, consuming and learning, you take things in and it might just get stored in your brain for a while and then pop out again as your own, literally pop out of your brain. It feels like it's your own original thought. So I think there's an element of that goes on, but then there's also an element of, and this is something I would definitely say to just be really wary of, because I catch myself doing this as well. You're scrolling the feed, you're reading what other people are talking about, and it can kind of spark your own ideas. Sometimes it's a good thing, but other times it's like you've just got to be really careful of this, because you might start going off down tangents that really aren't your theme, like they're not your lane. Yes, you might have something to say about it, but when you are, regurgitating someone else's ideas, opinions, it does not carry the same weight or energy as it does when you've created it yourself. So I always like to leave a bit of space. Like if you've been doing your scroll, don't immediately start creating your content, because all that stuff that's fresh in your brain that you've just been reading, that's other people's stuff, is probably what's going to come out. I like to kind of do my scrolling and reading at a time like just before I'm going to bed, or whenever I'm actually not about to create content. And what I do before I create my own is I go out walking. I go and get my body moving, because this stuff is inside your brain already. Like what you want to talk about, it's already there. You just need to kind of release it. And it's just so much more powerful. Like your content will have so much more weight when it's coming from within. And if I share one more thing, sorry, I'm like, I'm on a little tangent.
I love it.
I've had 2 coffees today, so it's like it's all happening. But I think if you're working with clients, this is probably one of the easiest sources of fresh content that you have, that just means you're always unique and you're actually always a thought leader. Plus, you're so relevant to your audience. So I'm not sharing, really personal things that are going on, but I'm like, a client asked me this question today, and that is actually a really great question. Other people probably have that question. So I can create a piece of content around that. Or, there was a discussion going on in my group today, and, we uncovered these things. Great. Like, how easy is that? You actually already know what was going on. Or, if you're doing a done for you service, you could have a story about what it was that you were working on, and something that you saw that you're like, well, they didn't actually realize this had happened, or that they were doing this, and this is what I've done. You can create so much content that really, I think, can help to show your authority and show what you do in such an easy way, because you can kind of tell a bit of a story around it. And this is, I think, a massive untapped well. I see a lot of people talking at everybody saying, you need to do this, stop doing that. It's like, oh, it can feel quite heavy when we're just receiving all this, like, don't do this, don't do that, stop this, stop that. And sometimes the feed feels like that. And I'm very conscious to be like, oh, let's try not to tell people what to stop today. I'm going to give them something that feels a little bit more empowering and energetic. So anyway,
and also, and yeah, you're 100% right. Stories uncopyable, right? As long as they are your actual genuine stories. And the other thing you talked about was like finding your own voice. So like putting the noise away and just being like, what is my voice? What is my message? And I love that because I have to do that on a regular basis. It gets noisy out there and I'm just like, I need to figure out what's going on in here. But the other thing I wanted to say is when your clients come to you with, I like to call it the tipping point. So I like to find the tipping point with my clients. What is the thing that made them say like, oh my gosh, I need help? And often I'll be like kind of a add-on for a web designer. So I work with a lot of web designers and they'll say, you need Emily for this.
Yeah.
So I asked the web designer, like, what was going on? Why did you refer them to need to have me do their copy rather than them doing their copy? And they were like, well, their coach wrote their copy for them. And it was a mess, so I'll use that story. I'll say like, I had a client, she came to me, her coach had written her page and it just wasn't written for a website. Like it was beautiful, but it just was not for a website.
Yeah.
And when you do that, when you use those kind of examples, the beauty of them is your audience can see themselves in the specificity of the example. So you might think like, well, this is a really, really specific story, but those are the ones we connect with. Like those, those really specific memes on Instagram, those are the ones that get us raising our hand and being like, oh my gosh, I do that too. I do that too. Because they're because they're so specific that they become relatable to every single person.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Are there any other, like, that's such a, like, super specific as well, like time and place of like, what was the tipping point that someone was in that made them actually decide to work with you? Like, wow, what a specific question to ask yourself. And for every client that you have or have had, like, go through and just sort of brainstorm a bit and see what's coming up. Are there any common themes? I think that's such a great tip, Emily. Are there any other like little hidden places that you're like, here's another little nugget where you could actually generate your own content from? Are there any other ones that you might use?
Definitely. Let me give you another. I'll do a few website ones, but let me give you another on a client front. So a lot of service providers will probably identify with a situation where either it didn't go smoothly with the client or you hit a snag or it was like, I'm not making this person happy, right? Like something happened where there was like a moment and it's up to you now as the service provider to like keep on delivering that customer experience. Like you have to sometimes dig deep and like figure out how to solve this problem. So I'm going to use an example. So I had a woman I was working with and she wasn't, with the editing process, you kind of have to go through with like Google Docs. And I think it was overwhelming for her. And I watched it happen. Like I wasn't like live time watching her edit, but I was watching her struggle with it. And so I was like, I'm happy if you want to like get on a call and we can just go through this together. And like when I said that to her, I don't do that for people. Like that is not my thing. I don't like calls. I'm like, the less calls, the better. But when I said that to her and we got on the call and we had the opportunity to go through everything, she's like, oh, it's fine. I guess I don't really have any edits, but I was just like sitting there going line by line and like picking it through. So I might use that example and say like, I will do whatever it takes to go the extra mile for my clients. Like I want to offer them an impeccable customer experience. So find those examples for yourself in your own business. Like where are you willing to go the extra mile for people? what is your customer experience that is different from everybody else? Like maybe you have this special little touch. I like to send a lot of my clients a mug and like a little cup of tea. And so a lot of them send me photos of it and I'll post that and I'll be like, oh, so-and-so just got their little cup of tea. And now they can sit down when they're reading their website copy and drink their tea and it feels less stressful, right? So just things like that like where in your customer experience do you do things differently that you can kind of bring attention to? Those are the things that make us unique too. Like we can all sell the same exact products, but not everybody can sell it in the way that you can. Not everybody has that customer experience you offer. And then going to I just want to touch on your website because that's like a gold mine. Like most of us spent a lot of time writing our websites and we are like, this is the most genius copy. This is the most genius thing out there. But then we do nothing with it. Like it's just sitting there being read mostly, but mostly not, right? Nobody reads the whole website. Yeah. So I would challenge everybody listening, if you want just one little action step, go on your website and go to your home, about, and services page and just like mine it for pieces of content that you can reuse. Like you have some zingers on there, trust me, because especially if you hired a copywriter, they're putting those one-liners in there that are like gold. So go in there and find the little pieces that you can pull out, like that what sets me apart section. There's a great post. The about me page, there's a great post. Your services page, every single one of the services is a great post. Or you can talk about how you offer the service differently. So it's like chock full. I mean, that could last you a month. Just focus on your website for a month.
And like you say, like it's sort of like taking that then like, okay, so here's my about page or my services page. That's your high level. Now, you're not just going to copy and paste what's on there into a post, but you're going to say, right, what sort of content could I create from this? So have I got a story that I can, break it down? Like, well, I've got 3 services. Is there a story that I can tell about this? Is there a how-to that I can tell about this? Is there an example? There's so many different types of content you can create from it. I love to do the ones that's like a bit of a perspective shift. So I like to get people to think a little bit differently. So a lot of the time my posts end up being quite long and I apologize to everybody for that. I'm not the short caption writer. I don't know. I always try to do it. I start out thinking this one's going to be really short and punchy. And then, 10 minutes later, it's not. It's long and I have to, cut some of the characters out because it's too long. But
don't apologize. Adam Grant just posted the other day. He's like, long form content. He said like short form content is great for quippy, silly. I don't know. You should find the post because I'm totally butchering it right now, but long form content.
Oh, good.
That is the hill I will die on too.
Say yes, because it's the only way I know how to do it. But yeah, I think it's like, you take that one page that you're saying, and like there's so many kind of different actual types of content that you could create from it and different ways that you can share it. So, use that as the source and then come up with what you're going to actually post about it. So hopefully that helps, because I love that. It's such an easy, again, there's hidden content you've already created. It's sitting right there. It's just so useful. Thank you for sharing that, Emily. Is there any so I guess if they're thinking, well, starting off a content bank, we've touched on having a content bank. Do you have any specific tips around what people should do if they're thinking, well, I don't currently have a content bank? What would you say to somebody who's listening and thinking, oh, I like the sound of how easy that makes my life, but where do I begin? And we probably don't want to spend, weeks creating one. So what would be a tip that you could give someone that just helps them to start one, maybe with what they're already doing today?
Yeah. So the first, I just did a podcast episode, which is called Taking Inventory. And basically it is sitting down and taking a look at everything you have. And I really list out here's where all of these pieces of content live. But let's just start super, super small. Start with your website, because exactly what you said, every single service is a story. Every single service has a testimonial attached to it. It has what's included in the service, who it's for. It just like there have got to be at least 5 pieces in every single service that you offer.
Yeah.
So I would really just start with your website. If you want to then start adding other pieces from other pieces of content, just start with one piece at a time, like take one. Today, I'm just going to do one blog. Do not challenge yourself to sit there and be like, I'm going through it all in one day.
Yeah. Don't create a mountain that you've then got to climb because you won't climb it.
Because then also you're going to get a little overwhelmed in like how to share it, where to share it, when to share it. Oh, I don't want to share it today. Oh, I never want to share that. So just make it really, really easy for yourself and start creating that bank. And I think the one nice thing about the bank is it gives you a place to go if you're like, I can't think of anything. And, we all do go through these sort of lulls, slumps, and like we cannot think of anything to post. It's just like nothing is happening in our brains. So then you can dive into that content bank. It's ready to go. You can juice it up a little bit, cut things out, but it's just like, it's like your back pocket resource, basically, if you are just hitting a creative wall.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And, if anyone's thinking, the idea of having their stuff in an Asana board like I do, I didn't go back and save all of the stuff I'd already created. I literally just started one day and went, okay, from today, I'm just saving every post that I create. And, it just became part of the process. Like, here's the post posted there and it gets saved into Asana. And so it then becomes something that's just actually part of your process instead of it being something new or an additional task. It's, and ideally if you have a VA doing it, that's amazing. But, you just make that part of their process. So it actually just becomes really easy. And before you know it, you've got this enormous, bank of content, and it's partly about thinking, what are the core themes that you're saving it into so that it's not just a giant list with no structure. You probably want to think, okay, I've got a few topics and the posts are going to fall in under those topics. But, that can be super easy, can't it? It can just be something that you start and before you know it, you've got something there. So I love that, just making life easier. There was something that just came up while we were talking before, and I thought, I was talking to a client about this just the other day because they were like, I've got an email. I need to really email my list and I don't know what to do. And I was like, okay, well, are you posting anything on your Instagram? Are you posting anything have you written a blog lately? And they're like, yeah, I've got this and that. And I'm like, well, there's an email. Just take it, put it into an email. Like you said earlier, sometimes we've got this block around doing an activity because we think we need to go and write something, but you've already written it. So just look at that, look at what you're already producing, and just can make life so much easier, can't it?
I need to get back to this. For a while, I was challenging myself to do one piece of content a week, just one. Like if I can just do a podcast episode, I have enough content for the week. I should literally have to do nothing else. So, because there are just so many different ways to break it down and share it to email and share it to Instagram and share it to Facebook. Like you should really have enough in one episode, in one blog. And I want to just speak to people who are doing guesting and speaking too. So every question that Jessica asked me tonight is a perfect question for me to take and go turn into a post of my own. Like, because literally you asked me a question, I answered back in my words, right? So and I would then bring attention to Jessica. I would say like, Jessica asked me this fantastic question. Here's my thoughts on it. So if you are guesting on other people's podcasts, gold mine. Like get off the interview, jot down 2 or 3 points, and then write it the next day, and tag them in a post. If you're on a speaking engagement, I love how earlier you had mentioned like people are really drawn to that like kind of natural, off the cuff, genuine. I was just at a speaking engagement in September and this lady's like, oh my God, it didn't even seem like you had notes. And I was like, I think I did, but I don't remember. I had like all my notes totally written out. So I took the notes and I turned them into like different posts, but in the more natural way that I had presented in the presentation. My point being, you can take presentations you're doing and break those down into different things. So it's just like, it's literally everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. It's at your dinner table when somebody asked how your day was or what kind of clients you're working with right now. So
I love it. And I think the thing is, it's like, what part of it is knowing that you already have it. Like you've actually already created this content, you know your stuff, you've got something on your website, whether or not a copywriter wrote it for you, they still had to get it from you in the first place. So you actually still know it. If you've spoken on any podcast, if you've written anything, like that content lives within you. And so you always have this source of it. So, as soon as we get that worry, like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to say, or I don't have anything to say, let's try to shift that into actually, hang on, I do have stuff to say because I've got a business and I've got a reason why I'm here. Let's remove that block there because it's all within you. And when you're panicking about it, you're in lizard brain mode and the lizard brain can't think creatively. So we just want to feel confident in yourself that you have everything you need is already within. And it's just a matter of, diving in and helping it come out.
Someone I follow as a content prompt, Simone Sull, she says, what would I say if I was just going to tell them the truth? And I love that as a starting point for sitting down and writing your content. Like, okay, what would I say if I was just going to tell them the truth? There you go. That's your content prompt for the day.
Absolutely. This has been amazing. I can tell you've just got so much to share. We could talk about content forever, I think, Emily. But you do talk about content on your podcast. So do you remind us what the podcast is called? I'm going to link that up in the show notes. So if anybody wants to, come and listen to you and learn even more about creating content, I think that would be a fantastic place to start.
Thank you. Yes, we really get into all the parts and pieces of it. So I super appreciate that. It is called the Content with Character podcast, kind of with the goal of creating content that is distinctly you, meaning nobody else can copy it. And I would love to have you over there. So you can find it on my website, which is emilyaborn.com. I am probably the only Emily Aborn because I've Googled my name a million times and I'm the only one that comes up. So you can find me anywhere you want under Emily Aborn.
Amazing. I'll get that linked up in the show notes. And do you have a favorite social media platform that you'd like to hang out on?
I'll say this. I have the most fun on Instagram. I play a lot with my personality on Instagram.
Yeah. Yes. And are you, as a writer, have you got into Threads?
No, I tried. I tried.
I'm just interested to know because I'm like, it's kind of that little bit different place. And as a writer, you might just be like, oh, I'm straight into just writing a few things here and there. But yeah,
I think I get overwhelmed with the number of platforms that there are, and that's too much for me. So I'm focusing right now, my actual business efforts on LinkedIn pretty much only. And then I just play on Instagram. I mean, Instagram's algorithm does not like me. So I just have fun with it.
Yeah, me too. I've stopped trying to figure out the algorithm because I'm like, you know what? You could try your hardest every day, every week to be like, well, someone said that you've got to post one reel and one live and a carousel or 3 reels a day or whatever. There's always, I think there's 10 million different systems out there for someone saying this is the formula, and then they're changing it all the time anyway. So what's the point? Seriously, just create whatever you think, well, this bit of content I think would work better with me saying it, so I'm going to do a reel or a story where I speak, or this bit's better as a photo. I think just whatever makes it easier and put something rather than nothing, right?
Agreed.
That's my strategy, but don't have to listen to me. I'm not the queen on Instagram by any means. In fact, I would just laugh saying that. But thank you so much. Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate your time. You've been very generous with us, shared so much in this episode, and I love that it's all about making life easier. let's remove the stress and the hassle around creating content because you've already got it. We've got it. So much of it actually that, Emily shared some really great ways of being able to break that down and make it feel simple and easy. And I think her main tip was just focus on one first, one at a time. Get a little bit of structure there. Let's not get overwhelmed now that we've opened that lid of the giant well of content that you probably have. Let's not feel overwhelmed by it, but actually feel really empowered by it. Wow, we've just solved a massive problem that you might have been feeling you had.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yes, amazing. Thank you. And we'll definitely chat again soon. But thanks so much, Emily.
Thanks, Jessica.
Is your lead magnet bringing you subscribers or buyers? Now, this is a great question, isn't it? Because most of the time, people have decided they want a lead magnet because they know that they want to build their email list. We want to build an email list because we're told that that's where the sales come from. Email is still the number one sales tool for a business, and that is where most people make their sales from. Even if they have a really great social media presence, they are usually working to get their audience off social media and into the email list because an email list is something that you own. But what is the value of your email list? Now, if you only have people in your email list who are there for the information and the fun times, but they're not the right buyer for you, then what is the point of having it? What is the value of having 10,000 non-buyers on your email list versus having maybe 1,000 actual potential buyers? Now, I know which one I would rather have. And that's why I've put together a mini course, a short course that's called Creating Your Irresistible Lead Magnet. Now, this course is designed to help you come up with a lead magnet that attracts buyers who are right for your offering, who are right for your programs, as opposed to subscribers who are interested in what you have to say, but are not going to be the right fit to buy from you. And yes, there's a huge difference there, a subtle but very big difference. And it can make all the difference to your business if you get this right. So right now, I'm offering a crazy deal on this Irresistible Lead Magnet course, mini course, where it's half price, usually $397. I'm offering it for $197. Just $197. You get to keep it forever. Yes, you can dive in now, do your lead magnet, but you can keep it forever so you can come back and do it again. And I'm going to throw in as just an extra special thing just for you because you're doing this now, a live Q&A where you can dive in, do this mini course, and then join me with your questions. Join me to ask what you need to ask, get some feedback, get some help, get some coaching, whatever it is that you need in this Q&A session. So head along to jessicaosborn.com/ILM for Irresistible Lead Magnet. So ILM, and get yourself into this course today. Learn how to create a lead magnet that brings you real buyers, and let's see your email list start to become your absolute most valuable asset in your business.